Hello fellow space engineers, this is Marcelo from ACFM Gaming, and today I want to bring you another fleet update. I know I have been doing these kind of videos recently, but I want to show you the further evolution in what I have been creating and coming up with. Now, eventually I know that I have a lot of things in the back burner, and one of those, so I haven't forgot, is the review of three different kinds of gravity guns. Now, some of you have submitted designs for me to review, and those of you, you know who you are, so I haven't forgotten. So keep that in mind. Now, as for the first thing that you would notice here is that my fleet, or our fleet, because this is also the product of several contributors, it's been through a reclassification. Now I finally gave in and decided to follow your suggestions, and especially those of Seth, in moving up, let's say, the ship's classes one notch. In that regard, my destroyer is now a cruiser, and the frigate is now a destroyer, and the Corvette is now a frigate. Now let me explain what happened. Let's say the main goal that I wanted to achieve was equalizing my fleet with the vanilla game, and at the same time the fleet classification system that my friends use. So mainly I wanted my destroyer to be on par with the WMI Komodos by Whiplash, and also with the Neo Virginia fleet that Seth makes. Now, let's say the biggest change, besides I have vanillified all my designs, though you already knew that, was with the Corvette. Now, the shape was the same, but it ended up being 3 blocks longer. Now, on the exterior, it looks really similar to its previous iteration, but once you go in, you will notice that the now each bulkhead has its own, contains its own separate, utility for that regard. And let me quickly show you here. Previously in this design, it only had two compartments, one CIC/crew quarters, and then one medbay, cryo, engineering, everything. It was just a mess. Now this is engineering. Again, as with most of my designs, I have, let's say, almost full access to all the blocks to be repaired manually. I also use a standardized airlock main access point for all my ships. You may recognize this from the Calypso. From here you can enter all the compartments, even the nut bridge up there. Now I used a scaled down CIC, same amount of information, but for two people in this tandem style fighter cockpit configuration. And this is a characteristic that is specific to this ship, is the crew compartment now has access towards the front, and I am still not done with this. I'm looking for ideas, suggestions. So the crew compartment has access to the mission package, and now the mission package basically is the entire bow of the ship. You know that I was developing that idea a bit earlier. Now I have decided to make this into a standard, and so also this kind of bow can be mounted on the cruiser, on the Calypso, in the underbelly, in spite of having changed the configuration of the merge blocks. Now, the other change that I, let's say, did to the entire fleet is the transition to ions towards hydrogen. Now, after experimenting a lot, I decided on this because, let's say, I'm going to classify ion thrusters as a cruising kind of thruster. It's really expensive, but once you reach it, you only have to worry about uranium. And if you're in a space in which it's, let's say, the ideal medium for the ion thruster, you have more access to uranium. So in a way, it's kind of like an end game level of thruster. and the hydrogen and the atmospheric thruster being like the beginning. So hydrogen I classify now as a maneuvering thruster. So most of the time when you're in a server or playing survival, you just want to move your ship from point A to point B, and that's basically a straight line. Then flip around, do a flip and burn, decelerate, and get there. So on a tangent, I also reduce drastically the number of retro thrusters. I decided to leave that as a responsibility of the pilot, not ramming things accidentally. So I also decided to have this asymmetrical thrust on the smaller ships, the ones that have a lower mass, so they can change vector faster. And for the frigate, there's one big hydrogen thruster and an array of small ones. This allows the frigate pretty much to keep it in line with Keen's vanilla frigates from the campaign to be able to be launched from a gravity well of a planet and reach orbit. Now, it's only to be launched from. It doesn't have any loitering capacity, so if you stay there for, let's say, more than just a few minutes, the few minutes that take for you to get out of the gravity well, it's just going to consume the entirety of the tanks, and the oxygen generators are not going to be able to keep up. So, and I did the same with the destroyer. It has two. Now this cannot be launched from a planet, but it can comfortably loiter on moons. Now the destroyer design was more of an idea. I mean, it wasn't much as an idea as much as it's a replacement, a necessity to replace the Aquila, which was the previous class of ship that I had that filled this gap between the small one and the bigger one. Now let me show you quickly what happened. The Aquila has its own particular history amongst us, and it's some could once described it as the ship that has been most improved from this fleet, and that is telling us something. It's a ship that it was in constant redesign, and I was at the point in which I wanted to, retire it in two occasions, and then we managed to bring it back, reconfiguring the armaments. Now, as you can see here, I was in the process of painting it and, rearranging the retro thrusters to the new. So, in case you don't know, the thruster damage has been increased. So I think it's now 6 large blocks, if I'm not mistaken. And I started working on that. Then I started, working inside of the engineering compartment, and I just had it. I was looking at this, and it's too cramped. It's the original idea with the Aquila was to have the thinnest hull possible to keep a low profile while facing forwards towards the enemy, and then the thing grew and it got also elongated in some points. So let's say the ass was doing something while the face was doing something different. It just got out of control. So, and eventually with the vanillifying of the ships, these two um, side I'm forgetting words here, rocket turrets, they ended up shooting each other. So that basically did it for me. So I decided to go with a shape that would fit in more with the let's say architectural style of the rest of the fleet. So in some areas is an enlarged nymph class, and in some areas is a scaled down Calypso. So this ended up being a perfect blend, and being a destroyer, I made sure, as in most of my ships, that every single weapon can face forward and shoot at the same target at the same time. And also, you will notice that the bow has been elongated. It's significantly longer than in the frigate, and especially than the Calypso. And it houses, let me quickly show you here, a hardened decoy. There it is. So you can see it has those two outer layer light armor, then this wall of heavy armor, this one that is being clipped through here, that's heavy armor, then almost like a free floating wall of blaster blocks so their damage transfer doesn't go straight through, and then 2 decoys that are self-repaired. Now the ship has top and bottom heavy armor, the rest is light armor, so in a way it's focusing more on avoiding damage to the interior components than actually soaking it up as the Calypso, which is more designed to soak up damage. Now that puts them more in their classification of destroyer and cruiser now. Okay, what else? So that made me reconsider a lot of things about what is offense in Space Engineers. I still hold my opinion that we do not have offensive weaponry at this point, that those turrets are mainly defensive armament, and we are still waiting to see Keen to come up with a heavier kind of turret, or maybe different kinds of damage output. Let's say energy weapons, I don't know, plasma, stuff like that. Now, that being said, regarding defense, I have never been one to shy away from role-playing spaces in ships, and at this point they do act as a defensive measure. Let me quickly show you here, in which, as you can see here, we have a mess hall and the crew compartment. At this point they do nothing but just look pretty, trying to make the most out of vanilla blocks, but they do act as a buffer, considering that you're going to be looking at the enemy. Now, last but not least, changes to the Calypso. I decided to bring back the old style of bridge. I think it looks more serious. I also added these kind of like hammerhead style bulges on the side to increase the, let's say, anti-small craft protection, because as you know, it's really easy to dodge rockets with small craft now. It's just it's not even funny how easy it is. So I decided to increase the Gatling count, keeping it in line more with the cruiser configuration, and just some minor touches here and there. And that leads us to, let's say, the frosting on the cake, the new Bullcat. I had almost abandoned the previous Bullcat design, the hybrid that use hydrogen and turbines for atmosphere. Until then, I managed to fill the interior of this craft with a big tank, a hydrogen tank. And that basically made it. And then I took from there a little bit of inspiration from Seth's King Cougar for the data displays. I mean, they're basically just taking straight from his fighter, so quote unquote inspiration. And what else? Well, I guess that's it for now. So just let me quickly show you how easy it is to dodge rockets. So as a measure, in all my ships I now have a master switch for the scripts, so I don't have all these ships running all the same scripts at the same time, giving my sim speed, bringing it to a grinding halt. So let's go, and to make this interesting, retros off, extra VTOL thrusters on, as you can see there, to change vector quickly, and let's go full survival. Now, what turning the retros off allows is that you can shoot off but still retain some attitude control. Now, I'm going to use just Gatlings only. I know it's a static target. Everyone's favorite target, the Hyperion class frigate by JD Horks. Just looks so nice, so streamlined. So okay, we are in range. Just gonna. So as long as you press spacebar and Q, you're almost immune to rockets. Now, if I had better aiming, I would know where I'm shooting at, so I will be actually peeling off those turrets. Now, this is a tactic that our friend Gyro calls the corkscrew, I think. It's basically an orbit. There you have it. And I know it's harder when the targets are moving and you're being outflanked, but the principle remains the same. Whoa. Yep. It's hitting itself. You can fully disarm, I mean, if you're a skilled pilot, you can fully disarm a frigate in a single pass. And I actually seen Gyro do it, so... Okay, here we go again. So you fire that burst, then you move to the other, you know, before it actually hits you. Now you can do this with or without decoys. Decoys make it easier. The decoys on this fighter are on the wingtips, so if I press Q, there you go. If I press Q and E, just basically dodge the missiles, the rockets, sorry. Well, that's all for now. Let's see, do we have any impacts from the Gatling? Yeah. That's just minor. 0 rocket impacts. Now, in case you're wondering, this craft retains the functionalities of the previous Bullcat. It's the closest, it's actually even better than the original version. So, I will be posting this in the workshop soon. Take care and keep playing.